Joining us on the Wester Hotline, a guy I'm a fan of, Ben Gretch. You can follow him on Twitter at yardspergretch, and does a substack, Stealing Signals. He joins us in the Wester Hotline and chat a little about the AFC East and these offenses. Ben, good morning. It's Jeremy and Joe. Thanks for taking some time bright and early. I know you're out in the West Coast.
Yeah. Waking up with you guys, having my morning coffee. Thanks for having me on.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Ben, for people that maybe don't know about Stealing Signals, just tell everybody a little bit what it is before we kind of dig into the Bills offense, the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Jets, and what this division might look like this year.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's more fantasy football focused, but I definitely try to blend real football analysis with the stats every week during the season. I do game-by-game breakdowns on Monday and Tuesday that looks at fantasy values, but also, talks about the sport as it's played and how the stats are compiled, because I don't think enough people who are purely looking at the numbers think about the unique elements of, the different offenses and those types of things. And the AFC East has a lot of unique elements to it this year.
What about it jumps out at you as being the most unique?
Well, I mean, each of the teams have unique elements. If you look at like Miami and the Jets, for example, they have two sides of a similar coin, which is in fantasy football, we're looking for volume a lot of the time. And when you look at like pass rate, for example, you're looking at called pass plays, but different quarterbacks will turn called passes into pass attempts at different rates. And so because of Tua's concussion history, one of the things we've been seeing in Miami the last several years is his scramble rate has declined. His rate of designed runs has declined. He's taking fewer sacks. He's getting the ball out a ton. So they're calling more pass plays, but they're also turning called pass plays into pass attempts at one of the highest rates in the league. And so you're going to get a ton of pass volume. And they have a really concentrated offense. You have the potential for really high reception numbers. A fun stat on them, Devon Achane had more receptions than any running back in the league last year by 10. And he did it despite having massive splits in the Tua games versus the non-Tua games. He had 6 receptions per game in the 11 games Tua played, and only 1.8 per game in the 6 games that Tua missed. And so you have this potential for him to have a massive receiving role, or Tyreek to have a bounce-back year, or those types of things. With the Jets, you have sort of the exact opposite end of the spectrum. They're going to be more run-heavy. Their whole offensive line grades better as run blockers than pass blockers. They have very good running backs, and they have Justin Fields' dual threat ability. But then the other big thing is when they do call passes, which is going to be a lower rate, Fields also scrambles at an incredibly high rate. He takes sacks at an incredibly high rate. So he turns those called pass plays into pass attempts, which turn into targets and catches and the ability for receivers to get stats at a very low rate, which makes it really hard for a guy like Garrett Wilson, for example, who I really like as a talent. Makes it really hard for him to have a statistical ceiling that makes him a fun fantasy football player.
As you're kind of getting into this, you say it's skewed to fantasy football to some degree, but what it reveals is, something that really happened on the football field. Tua getting a concussion changes kind of the way that they operate their offense, right? That calling pass plays, but also getting more pass attempts out of those. That is where these numbers that you kind of dig into can show you maybe a team's tendencies or why they can be a bad matchup for a specific opponent within the same division.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating thing in terms of how the real life stuff is going to impact that. But a lot of people were talking about the quick passing game to the perimeter for Miami as being something that was a little bit gimmicky last year. Jonnu Smith had a ton of catches late. They ended up trading him this offseason. I think that is their way of matching something that the teams with the mobile QBs can do, which is stretching defenses laterally at the line of scrimmage. If you have, Justin Fields, or if you have Josh Allen, right, the ability for those guys to pull on like a read option where they're maybe going to give to a running back up the middle, but they pull the ball, has to hold the defensive ends and the edge defenders on the outside. And we see that mobile quarterbacks have a very positive impact on running backs' rushing efficiency because defenses can't crash down on the run because they have to respect the ability of the mobile quarterback to pull the ball and go around the end, right?
Yeah.
Well, in Miami, you can't do that with Tua. So the way that they manufacture that is those quick passes to the perimeter. They split out Achane. They split out Jonnu Smith a lot last year. And Tua is actually really good at quickly releasing and throwing it accurately to the perimeter. It's not like an elite skill necessarily, but there are guys who are better at that than others. And so the guys that were Achane and Jonnu that were catching those quick passes had really, really high catch rates last year because they're basically extended handoffs. And it allows them to stretch defenses horizontally, pre-snap, force defenses to put players on the perimeter, which also should help them run up the middle a little bit and do some of the things over the middle of the field that they want to be able to do. So that's going to be a part of their offense, I think, again this year, and it's going to lead to really high reception rates. So if you play in those PPR leagues, I think the Miami guys are pretty valuable for that.
Ben, I want to run this by you because it's been something, here in Buffalo, we kind of live in the MVP debate at quarterback over the last couple seasons. Ben Gretch joining us on the Western Hotline. And when you say that mobile quarterbacks help a running game, here we're talking about whether or not the Bills should extend James Cook and sign James Cook. And in Baltimore, Derrick Henry had huge numbers. And for me, I feel like the MVP conversation always gets to, well, that guy has help, so that should work against him. But this point you make about mobile quarterbacks helping a running back, to me, that's a point in favor of an MVP argument. The existence of Allen helps Cook. That's value you're getting additionally from Allen. And the same of Jackson, too. Like, Jackson, when he hands the ball off to Henry, him being there is still super valuable to that run game's existence.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I think you put that very well. As far as from what I see in the numbers, what I expected going into last year and what I saw during the season, I think both those quarterbacks were significant elements to both those running backs having the seasons that they did. Henry having the big bounce back year, at age 30 after a tough year in Tennessee the year prior was largely because you have Lamar Jackson's threat to pull the ball and run on the edge and be so dynamic in the run game. And James Cook going from 2 rushing TDs the first couple of years to now under Joe Brady, they're doing things a little bit differently. He has 16 rushing TDs last year. I mean, that's because also Josh Allen's rushing TDs have spiked under Joe Brady, and they're using him as more of a rushing threat in the red zone, and that just makes it more difficult to put the numbers in place to stop Cook from getting the space he needs. I mean, obviously he's a good running back as well. It works both ways, but certainly Josh Allen's unique skill set is having a very positive impact there.
How could you see their offense evolving, Ben? They faced one of the highest rates of stacked boxes in the league last year, which is almost incredible. They were able to run the ball as well as they did anyway. And then this year they go out and I think they improve the receiver position. I don't think they're like the best in the world, but Josh Palmer and Elijah Moore over Mac Hollins and whatever was left of Amari Cooper. If they can get more separation down the field, how do you feel like that could, evolve the whole offense?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. That's what makes them unique as well. I mean, over 60 offensive touchdowns last year, which is a huge number, and yet only Allen and Cook scored more than 6. Ray Davis was third on the team with 6 touchdowns. Mac Hollins had 5. Everyone else on the team had 4 or fewer, which is shocking. I mean, that's what the numbers look like for the teams that don't score a lot of touchdowns in terms of spreading around the love a little bit. It's funny, the Bills have that everyone eats mentality, and I think it does negatively impact them a little bit for fantasy because they have kind of different roles and packages and ideas for the different things they want to do. I really like Khalil Shakir, what he's been able to do. Obviously, a lot of what I just described about the quick passing game to the perimeter in Miami, Bills fans will know that Shakir was a huge part of that in Buffalo. They added that with him, the swing passes, and he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. He has probably not shown the downfield separation and target earning of some of the other receivers that he's going around in drafts. So I'm curious to see how his skill set will develop. He's certainly my favorite piece in the passing game for the Bills. But I do think you mentioned some of the new names. They're going to use a lot of these guys. They're hoping Keon Coleman develops. They're hoping to get a healthier season out of Dalton Kincaid. And I do think it's a little tricky in the passing game, even if that develops, because their pace slowed way down last year as well. This is a team that used to run pretty up-tempo offenses with Josh Allen and was very slow last year. And despite scoring over 60 touchdowns, I mean, they're a team that ran well under the league average in play volume. And then the other key number for them was their pass rate over expectation. The expected pass rate would be relative to game situation. So the fact that they're winning all the time does mean that they would be expected to run more, but their pass rate over expected was still negative. It was the negative for the first time since either 2018 or 2019. It had been about 5 years solidly in the positive. And so this, Joe Brady offense, it shifted in the middle of 2023. It looked a lot different down the stretch. and they were so efficient still, scoring all the touchdowns, playing at that slower pace. I mean, that was one of the big reasons I did like Josh Allen in the MVP discussion. A lot of people said statistically Lamar Jackson has such a great discussion, such great stats. But if you really watched the games, I mean, the Bills were lethal on a per drive basis and scored a ton of touchdowns and those things. But the way that they structured their offense was a little slower, a little bit more spread. But clearly it's all around Josh Allen, and all the other pieces are basically just built to support him and what he brings. I think he's fun in fantasy. I do think it makes it a little tricky for the Bills and all their pieces being like fun fantasy players.
Ben Gretch stealing signals. One last team, we haven't checked too much on the Patriots. They've got a lot that I think should be excited about. I'll be the first one to say, I think Drake May has shades of Josh Allen. Of course, he's got a long way to go to get there. What do you think New England can expect out of their offense this year? It's kind of tough with, right, a change at coach and some new players and a quarterback that really only played, half the season last year, did not win a lot of games, but flashed enough to show people that there's reason to maybe be excited. What do you ultimately see from New England offensively as they've been pretty brutal for a couple of years here?
Yeah, their win total over/under in Vegas is up to 8.5. They're expected to be a 500 team, which is one of the biggest jumps from their actual finish last year. So the market does think this is going to be a better team. They've done a lot to address the defense. Drake May looked really, really good last year. They brought in some depth at offensive lines, some free agents that kind of project more like league average types, but that should actually raise the floor for a unit that was pretty bad. And then obviously, addressed it in the draft in a big way. But this is a team that looks like they're moving the right direction, new coaching staff, everything that you mentioned. But it is a little bit hard to tell. I really like Travion Henderson, the rookie running back. I think he's got a really good profile. Obviously, two veteran backs and Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson there that will make it so that he's probably going to be more of a late season hit if he hits in a meaningful way for them this year, because those veterans will often get the early season work. Then they add three receivers in Stephon Diggs, Matt Hollins, and the rookie Kyle Williams. Obviously, two of those guys have the Bills ties. Hollins had his best year of his career 3 years ago under Josh McDaniels with the Raiders, and so I do think he's going to play. He played a decent amount for the Bills last year. I think Diggs, as long as he's healthy, is going to be probably the pretty clear number one. But it's still tricky because they have most of their wide receiver room from last year back. They have Demario Douglas back. They have Kayshon Boutte back. They still have Kendrick Bourne under contract. They're paying him a good amount of money. Both the rookies from last year that didn't really do anything, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, are back. So they have 8 wide receivers that you could tell yourself a story might be a part of the mix. I think they're going to have maybe a surprise cut or two in there, actually. And they still have Hunter Henry, who led the team in targets last year, and Austin Hooper, who has the second tight end, pitched in 59 targets last year. Drake May liked throwing to those two veteran tight ends last year. So even if this team's better, it's similar to me to the Bills, where kind of hard to put my finger on which of the passing weapons I think can consolidate the volume. That's one of the big things in fantasy I think goes overlooked, is how concentrated the targets and the volume can be. That's something I really like in Miami, as we were talking about. But in New England, I think it might be a little bit trickier. I do like May, though. I like that skill set. The vertical passing plus the mobility usually can lead to some pretty big fantasy seasons. Ben
Gretch on the Western Hotline. Ben, thanks so much for the time. It's bengretch.substack.com, @yardspergretch, and really for fantasy footballers and people who want to dig into matchups and games, it's comprehensive. There's a lot of great stuff in there. Ben, great work, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. Have a good one.
Ben Gretch, up early with us.